Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Nick Watts, and welcome to College Football Under Review, a show made by a football fan for football fans everywhere. And on the docket today, we've got discussions on officiating within the college football landscape and how I want to see it evolve. The 2026 postseason debate has been shaken up again as the SEC and Big 10, with their seemingly ideal relationship last almost literally about a month ago, pushing for a specific postseason, has completely been broken up by this constant conference scheduling debates and how the Big 10 is just up in arms about it. And our third topic on the show is, with ESPN always attempting to predict and put out their list for the top 25 teams coming into the 2025 season, we must be sure that this is going to be incorrect at least by the end of the season, because there are so many SEC teams represented that will surely beat each other out up during the regular season. So we're going to just talk about some of the outstanding teams in that and kind of my 2 cents on the top 25. And as always, there's going to be something I've got to get off my chest. So in our first topic, going over this NCAA officiating debacle, I want to put it as, these players are starting to make more money and revenue sharing within the new framework of NIL. And I think that we need to have this discussion on one of the biggest factors of the sport, and that is the refs within the sport and the officiating. And you say, oh, that's not a big part of the sport. It has to be. Every game has to be officiated, so therefore it is a big part of the sport, even though we don't want to claim that it really has anything to do with the outcome, because God forbid if we say anything about that, especially coaches, they get fined. But I think we all have to agree that we have all had that moment that we're watching as fans where there's a close game that means life or death for a program's postseason hopes. And how many times have you sat there watching the game and praying that you don't see that ominous yellow flag on the field? And how many times has the outcome, or at least momentum in a game, shifted due to these officials and the yellow flag being thrown and the decision they make, as incorrect or correct as it may be, they're still making a decision? Some would say that a lot of these times, no, the refs don't, dictate the outcome. But some of these crucial moments that happen in the game with these decisions and flags, it can lead to the game-changing moment or points for another team and change the outcome ultimately. And so with that being said, I believe it's very imperative that we begin to question if we will see a shift in the future on how these games are officiated and the role of the referee in college football. The first point I want to bring up is that the difference between a college ref and an NFL ref is that the college officiating crews are considered part-time, unlike the NFL, who is full-time. Now, I definitely feel as the players are able to make money through NIL and have potential NIL deals on the table based on their performance, maybe wins and losses, some of these deals could be reversed due to a game's outcome. And I think it's very paramount that these refs get the calls right on the field and should have full intent to do so. I think that they all have full intent to do so. But with that in mind, I would like to see these officials kind of begin to transition and welcome it into a full-time position within the sport. Because let's be honest, even though we claim college athletics are amateur, it's just not really that way anymore with how much money is on the line in sports gambling. Even though that's an external factor, it's still a factor. Sports gambling, NIL deals, how much money these schools are generating in revenue. And we could see just how important it really is to make the correct call as one of the biggest atrocities by the officials last season in the sport really kind of happened against Texas and Georgia when the Texas fans started throwing trash on the field for a call that, based on the official, they didn't like. And after the dust had settled and they had to kind of clean up all the trash, it gave them time to look at the play. The official had looked up, kind of at the instant replay board, and the official had changed the previous ruling he already made. And it seemingly appeared that he was bullied into the decision, which is not a good look for anyone. And ultimately, yes, Texas did lose that game. It's important to understand that Texas gained momentum from that. They were able to gain momentum and at least bring it closer. So there is just an example of one of these officials kind of murking the water a little bit and how their decisions can affect outcomes later on in the game. Second thing that I want to state is that these referees must go through extensive background checks, and they can't, have simple pleasures in life, kind of like social media, as well as gambling. This already limits the accessibility to rights and use of pleasures that we find ourselves in the modern era, as these officials are sacrificing a lot of time already with traveling and training. And even recently, the FBI has even been in some of the meetings with refs and how to stay safe due to some of these rabid fan bases who seemingly would love nothing but to tar and feather officials. It's just another reason that I'm stating that we need to make them a full-time employee, especially if they're threatened. I think it's very much valued to be full-time, and this is not going to be part-time. And all this discussion could really give the idea that as a football fan, I adore and admire these officials, but I will answer that with a resounding cliche in that I think officials are a necessary evil that should be compensated for their time, energy, and mental fortitude that they have to withstand week in and week out. Now, with that being said, they should have to kind of be held accountable for their actions as officiating. I know they are graded based on how accurate their calls are, but when these calls are inaccurate, they really need to be able to put out a statement, because I think it's a little odd that you put these 18 to 21-year-old athletes and sit them in front of the media and allow them to be ridiculed for a loss while like the officials who have the potential to have made a bad call that led to that loss are not questioned like these athletes are, and are not required to have any discourse of public ridicule. Even the coaches can get fined by the NCAA if they have any rhetoric that implies that the referees made a bad call or they are the reason for the outcome of the loss. As part-time, obviously it's easier to said and done. They're just part-time. They only do this throughout the season, but their actions have consequences. I know that it's not a good look to have an official come out and give a statement, especially as soon as the game is over. I do think that if there is a very bad call, there should be statements made. And third is definitely the elephant in the room that has stomped its way through legal challenges in every state with ease, at least most states, and that is sports gambling. With the boom in sports gambling, these refs stress making the right call in crucial situations, because sometimes they can lead to many outcomes of different money changing hands and being wagered on a specific game's outcome. What am I saying by this? Sports gambling, yes, as an outside factor, it has no effect on the game, and officials shouldn't, consider that. I'm just saying, with how much money goes into sports betting, it's even more imperative and crucial that these officials get the right call, and they need to be compensated for making these calls, and they need to have this continued evolution to make officiating just so rudimentally structured within college football. I know it already is, but I'm saying that we can still continue to evolve it. And fourth is that these conferences need to really have a universal system to make sure that each conference's officiating pipelines of referees have the same standard of officiating throughout the board. As some conferences can have officials that are more lenient in certain areas or aspects of the game and can be more critical in other aspects. You can't sit here and say that all officiating crews are the same when I know for me, when these bowl games happen, I personally like having a Big 12 or ACC officiating crew because I feel like they don't call as many defensive penalties, especially in pass interference, and they kind of let the game play out. And that can be pros and cons, but you get some of these certain officiating crews and they're not having the same standard throughout everything. So we need to have a universal structure within college football so that these different conference officiating crews are able to not have, how do I say this? They aren't different in the way they officiate, and that's probably easy saying that, but it's something that's so true that these conferences have a different officiating crew. But this can also bring up the question that, is there a conference bias between officiating a game with not having a structured and universal way of choosing officials? This was definitely a talking point after Georgia Tech lost to Georgia in a thriller of a game. We've brought up this game probably the third time in the show, but it was honestly such a great game. And this is a great example of these other conference officiating crews in a crucial game. But with many calls going Georgia's way, it's kind of weird to say, hey, yeah, that crew was an SEC crew officiating that game, and it gives Georgia Tech kind of the ammunition to be like, well, if the SEC refs weren't there and we had ours, then we probably would have won. And that's not a good argument you want to have at all, because then you're saying that we lost because of the SEC crew. We didn't win because of our own ACC crew. And that is not good for the sport at all. You do not need to have officiating in question. And that's just a great example of why we should have a universally structured pipeline for getting these officials. And I understand that it's very hard to especially keep consistency within these crews because the NFL will poach the best ones. But overall, with the discussion of referees and officiating, I break it really down to a shift of professionalism in the structure within their roles and in college football. I think they should be paid and recognized as full-time employees with the ability to have the best training for in-game scenarios combined with their ability to answer on behalf of the NCAA on their actions and reasoning for officiating on the field that should be reviewed, as we have reached a new threshold in the state of the sport and evolution from amateurism. And, a surprising stat supports that the effectiveness of officials in recent years making correct calls on the field is around 98%, though some of these outliers definitely question if we are still heading down a good path. So while the challenges for officiating continue to be thought on everyone's mind, I believe that it's time for some reform, and discussions should take place within the sport on how do we evolve the officials even further. So with that out of the way, the once buddies of conferences, being the SEC and Big Ten, have seemingly turned against each other when it comes to the playoff/conference game and how many you play during the regular season and that whole discussion. The whole debacle and falling out between these two have been brewing really ever since the SEC started to slowly shift away from the 4 auto qualifiers for them in the Big Ten in the 2026 postseason formatting, as I kind of believe that Greg Sankey understands that the SEC has a better chance with these 11 at-large bids within the conference, and his coaches clearly favor it. And even though the programs really didn't, I still think the programs are starting to like the idea of that. And I think it just gives more opportunity for the SEC. Not only this, but the SEC has begun to push for the reevaluation for the strength of schedule metrics that are used by the playoff committee. So if they are seemingly pulling the rug out of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is not happy about this. So this is clearly upsetting the Big Ten, as they currently play 9 conference games for their program schedules, which allows the ability for more interconference conflict. You may say it's, only one more game than the SEC, kind of like what's the big deal, but it definitely has drastic impacts if the strength of schedule metric is changed. If we look at it, the 9 conference games leads to more potential losses to playoff fringe teams inside the conference that could limit the revenue and TV exposure to the Big Ten in the future. And you really don't want that. You do not want your best teams beating each other out and in this top tier of your conference. There's always different tiers. You want those top tiers to represent you well, have great seeds, and have no question that they are going to make the playoffs. Next is that the other conferences who have the ability to be more flexible without conference scheduling. Let me say that again. These conferences that only do 8 games have the ability to boost their strength of schedule exponentially to really give them a better chance to reach the playoffs. The SEC obviously favors this route based on the idea that they had 3 teams that were on the fringe: Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina last season. And so they're obviously going to want these SEC teams not to kick themselves out of a potential playoff berth. That all happened within the regular season for each of those teams. So as a reminder, with all of this argument between should the SEC go to 9 conference games, it's ultimately the conference's decision. I don't think that the Big Ten should be mad. That's your fault that you scheduled it that way. But the debate and answer to the 2026 playoff format must be unanimous by December 1st. And I think it's very likely that these conferences will want to push the debate further in the future for the playoffs another year, just because they're going to lose so much more money if they can't agree on this 16-team format for the playoffs. But by far the biggest winner in this debate has to be Notre Dame. They're sitting on the side like, yep, SEC, you fight on our behalf. You say everything you want. You want to reevaluate strength of schedule? Do it. Because as an independent and not within a conference, they have the full ability to put their postseason hopes solely based on their performance, and they are able to carefully craft a perfect strength of schedule combined with the easiest games that they can win. And I think another big argument within this that people may overlook is if they do, kind of reevaluate the strength of schedule metrics, it can very much hurt the Big Ten so much, because let's say that, oh, the Big Ten strength of schedule, like the teams within the conference this year, are not that good. You are going to basically, by having that extra game, weaken your strength of schedule. If they're kind of, a tier below and some of these teams aren't where they should be and their strength of the team is lessened, that means the conference as a whole's strength of schedule is going to weaken, and that overall is going to be a negative in metrics for them. So I definitely see why they are very upset. Why don't you just go to 8, okay, and just deal with it? But as the Big Ten continues to argue that the play-in format will bring more money and intrigue later in the regular season with that automatic qualifier spots, their argument really seems to only favor them as the group of 5 schools. I think will most likely favor the 5 automatic bids, 11 at-large bid format, in hopes that they can break the mold and have the ability to push for more equality within the postseason format. I just think the Big Ten is not going to win in this argument. I think it's very futile, though I think they will be able to find some sort of compromise, because the playoff format has to be agreed on unanimously. And it really does seem that the 2026 playoff expansion and format will continue to be a debate leading into the season, and we'll really see who starts to gain momentum probably after the first 4 weeks of college football, and we'll see if, December 1st kind of becomes this looming date as they struggle to really find a unanimous decision on what to do about these playoffs. So, the preseason top 25, with ESPN putting this preseason top 25 out for the college football earlier this month, I felt as I would like to just give some opinions on the rankings. So, obviously, when we look at it, Texas is no shock to really be a favorite in this upcoming season, as they have Steve Sarkisian doing another great job of recruiting. He is leading his offense, which he's a great offensive mind, and I know he is foaming at the mouth to use and have the full ability of Arch Manning's quarterback prowess and leadership put as the poster child for this program. And they are number one because the Longhorns have a very favorable chance to make this title run and win the title. It has been a long time since they have been in the national championship game. They were once giants. They fell off a little bit, but I think they are definitely back to the kind of top dog discussion within the sport. And let's be honest, their SEC schedule is fairly easy again this year. Can't stress it enough that Texas definitely got a lucky break. Lucky. I think Greg Sankey had something to do about their scheduling. And Oklahoma, God, I mean, they walked into the SEC and just got buzzsawed by their schedule. But I am sure to say that Texas will potentially win the national championship. You'll have to see right before the season starts if they are our prediction to be the national champion this season. So with the amount of SEC teams that are in this top 25, by the end of the season, they will surely dwindle as who is in it as they continue throughout the season to battle for their supremacy within the conference title race. So this is always misleading whenever we see these preseason top 25s, because ESPN's not predicting or stating outright, this is what the top 25 will look like at the end of the season. which I think would always be an interesting thing to look at. So it can always be misleading. I think a lot of these SEC teams may be in the top 25, but they're definitely not going to be in the top 25 by the end of the season. I can promise you that. Like Arkansas, come on. They're not a top 25 team. Oregon is kind of a shock, as the ESPN model has faith with how far high up they are in the ranking that they can continue to be a threat within the Big 10, even though they already are a threat as they won the Big 10 title last season. We may expect to see them falter later in the season if this transfer quarterback that they have cannot step up to the occasion. I think Dan Lanning is always week in and week out going to have a great game plan. It's just very interesting to see this new cast of characters on the offensive side of the ball and see if they are able to have continued success. They were in our discussion last week on who's America's team. I definitely think that this could be a scrappy bunch if this transfer quarterback works out. So another big question is, a lot of people love the Clemson Tigers to be a favorite in winning the national championship. If that's hope or accuracy, well, we'll just have to see once the toe hits leather come the fall. But is ESPN discounting Clemson as they put them outside the top 10 as 11? And are they just saying that they are the 11th best team? It seems like it. It seems like they are saying Clemson's barely going to make the playoffs this year like they did last year. And I think this gives more ammunition for Dabo and his Tigers to strive for perfection, as they are easily one of the show's best contenders for the national title. And a lot of people around the country have that sort of same sentiment and feeling within the sport. I definitely think that they have to discount him just because we don't know for sure if this will be a good team or not. We just know that they have a strong backing, and I think PR that is putting them out to be this great contender. But like I said, we'll have to see what happens. Another shock, got to get some water. And I think something that's a little dangerous for this coach, and that's Hugh Freeze at Auburn. And it really comes down to the question, will Auburn reflect being ranked 14th for ESPN? And will they actually live up to the hype that Hugh Freeze is able to kind of harness whenever he goes to a new program? And this season is definitely a much-needed sigh of relief for that program and for his coaching career. He really hasn't done all that much with the Auburn Tigers. Everyone had the argument he had to rebuild. Yes, he had to rebuild. But him not making a bowl game last season, that's unheard of. And I think it's a little dangerous putting, or at least ESPN and is putting Hugh Freeze in a tough spot. It's definitely dangerous to be ranked 14th in the preseason projected. And if they don't hold up to that hype, could get a little nasty for Hugh Freeze. So will they be 14th? I don't think so. The Iron Bowl is going to be in Tuscaloosa this year, and that always smells disaster for Auburn. There's always something about Jordan Hare that just gives Auburn superpowers. And as I said earlier about some of the SEC teams, a not so hot take is that I don't think Arkansas belongs in this top 25 list, as they had a very subpar season last year, even though they beat Tennessee. And, you know, Sam Pittman, their head coach, may be good for the program. I don't think that Arkansas belongs in this top 25. And I don't see them holding on to a top 25 spot if this ranking holds in the AP poll, which dictates the top 25 the first 8 weeks of the college football season. I definitely don't think they're going to be able to hold a ranking for maybe 2 weeks. And another team that was kind of shocking to be in there is Nebraska. And there's a big question with that. And that's, will they reach the top 25 when the season is said and done and have the potential to make a postseason run? They are in the Big Ten. It's going to be a grind and very tough schedule. But I think Nebraska is one of these fringe teams that definitely their top 25 ranking at the end of the season will definitely come down to a couple of one-possession games. And if they can swing Matt Rule's way with that Nebraska team, then I think he ultimately will be in the top 25. But one of the biggest reminders with the ESPN preseason top 25 is that we know it isn't going to be an accurate reflection of the rankings by the end of the season due to multiple of these teams playing each other and beating each other up throughout the season. So with all of that out of the way, we have an off my chest. And boy, oh boy, this is going to be kind of a more, not rant, but another discussion. And that is the NCAA 26 deep dive into their gameplay that they gave us. It was about a 5-minute video that EA Sports put out on, their college football 26, the new upcoming game releasing in July. And they gave us a deep dive into some of the new features and gameplay. And I'm definitely just going to put my opinion on what I thought of the video and what I think is interesting and some of the thoughts I just have. So we're getting features that aren't really new. They're claiming it as new features, new stuff coming out. But I definitely think that these features should be expected as they are continuing to improve the game and the gameplay. Obviously, it's going to improve drastically, I think, in these first kind of 4 years. And by the 5th year, they'll definitely have the formula figured out and have a great foundation for the game. So I think that this one next year and the year after, we're still going to see, small little improvements and maybe developments or additions of certain game modes, gameplay. But some of these expected features that they're adding include coaches' name, image, and likeness. This basically just means that they have coaches' likenesses in now. Last year, they didn't in their game. They have also included the specific programs' play tendencies and identities. So, like if you're playing Army, they are going to be running a triple option, stuff like that. They claim that they have new player tackle physics and new ways of tackling, and the audio sounds very good, but I think that these new player tackle physics is just another word for new animations for your player to get stuck in when you play the game. They had a small update to the Stadium Pulse. They expanded the game's playbooks and formations found within the game, which definitely was needed. And these are all, like I stated, things that should be expected and shouldn't be claimed as new features. But I still think there were some positives in this deep dive. Some of these updates seem very positive and very intriguing that I'm kind of glad they're adding. Like, one of the most interesting things that they are adding into the game is the height of your quarterback, especially if he's a pocket passer, is now becoming a factor. If you have to press Y, X, or LB, your offensive line will block your line of sight, and the button that you need to press, it will fade in and out based on that, which is a really cool addition to the game. And then next is the expansion of player abilities that are definitely needed. I felt like they had enough, but it's not bad to keep adding more. And one thing I do love is the new score bug for the game. I think the new score bug looks great for even an actual national program. But I think it's a great visually appealing score bug and definitely a upgrade from last time. The wear and tear is definitely evolving in this system. You know, obviously, if you don't really play the game or don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just briefly state what it is. It accurately reflects in the game the kind of wear and tear, which is where the name comes from, on players' bodies. And so if you get hit in the ribs, your player may lose attributes for, you know, holding on to the ball and may fumble it more. But it was a very interesting addition that they added into this new game. And we can obviously see that it is going to continue to be a staple. And I'm glad that they are going to continuously evolve it if it looks like it's going to be in the game for the long run. So overall, with the Off My Chest, I think that EA College Football 26, hands down, is going to be a better product and more developed product than EA College Football 25 last year. And I'm just saying that because they really have had more time to develop the game. They've had more time to add new features. And I think that hopefully, it seems like they are listening to the college football video game fan base. It is a diehard fan base. I personally still play NCAA 14, and I play it revamped right here. And I love it. It's so much fun. I haven't fully transitioned to that one. I definitely am excited for EA College Football 26. I am going to make a review on it when it comes out, and I will put that as a separate video on YouTube. So look out for that. That is going to be a YouTube only because visuals are really needed. But I'm still going to be pessimistically optimistic about the game because at the end of the day, this is EA that we're talking about. The Dynasty Deep Dive comes out June 24th. So that is literally in 2 days. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to see what additions they have to Dynasty because that is really the only game mode that I play the heck out of. And I really enjoy building up a team and a Dynasty. And it is such a great time and fun time and satisfying time when you finally do make that national championship with your team. So yeah, that's off my chest. Not as revved up as I usually am about Off My Chest. I just kind of wanted to have a discussion and get my thoughts and opinions off my chest about the recent deep dive for EA College Football 26. And sorry to admit it, no matter how bad the game is, if it ends up being bad, I will most likely buy it. So EA definitely has me in their clutches. And so that's about it for this episode. I know it wasn't as long as we usually keep it. We're in the lull of college football. Topics are a little scarce right now, but in about 2 to 3 weeks, you can expect a lot of fun content. And what do I mean by that? We will be taking our deep dives into all the conferences for 2025. We're going to go over the Power Four, and we're going to do Group of Five as their own weekend. But in the next 2 to 3 weeks, be on the lookout for that. We're going to be predicting. We're going to be diving into who we think could be wild cards, the best team, the worst team, who's going to end up in that specific conference title race, who is going to be the contenders or pretenders within that conference. So definitely get excited for that. Next week's show, you can obviously expect any relevant news concerning college football that happens over the week. And lastly, we may be having our show's first interview. So stay tuned for that next week. That may be out next week or just in the middle. We'll see what we do. But for all that, I'm Nick Watts. And thank all of you for tuning in to this episode. And we'll see you next time when we take more college football under review.